The moment my sister Amanda announced they were selling our family's lake house to pay my student loans, I felt the entire restaurant spinning around me. "It's already listed closes in 30 days, she said matter-of-factly, cutting into her steak, while our parents nodded approvingly. "We all agreed it's for your own good, Jody." I thanked them calmly for their concern, my voice steady despite my heart shattering. What they didn't know was that I'd been secretly paying the mortgage for 3 years. Driving back to my apartment in downtown Portland that night, I gripped the steering wheel so tightly, my knuckles turned white. The graduation celebration dinner had been a nightmare, disguised as family support. 28 years old, fresh out of graduate school with my social work degree, and this was how my family chose to celebrate my achievement. I pulled into the parking garage beneath my building and sat in silence for 10 minutes, trying to process what had just happened. The lake house wasn't just property to me. It was where Grandma Rose had taught me to fish every summer, where I'd learned to swim in the crystal clear waters of Lake Chelan, where I'd spent countless weekends helping her tend the garden that still bloomed with her favorite lavender and roses. My phone buzzed with a text from my best friend Sarah, asking how dinner went. I couldn't even begin to explain. Instead, I called Harold Brennan, the family lawyer who had handled Grandma Rose's estate when she passed away 5 years ago. Even though it was past 9 in the evening, Harold answered on the second ring. "Jody, sweetheart, what's wrong? You sound upset." "Harold, I need to ask you something about the lake house. My family just told me they're selling it to pay my student loans, but something doesn't feel right." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. When Harold spoke again, his voice carried a weight that made my stomach drop. "Jody, I think you need to come see me first thing tomorrow morning. There are some things about your family's financial situation that you don't know." That night, I barely slept. I kept thinking about the $800 I'd been sending home every month for what I believed were property taxes and maintenance costs for the lake house. My parents had told me it was my contribution to keeping Grandma Rose's legacy alive, and I'd been happy to help even when it meant eating ramen noodles for dinner more nights than I cared to count. The next morning, Harold's secretary, Janet, ushered me into his oak-paneled office overlooking the Willamette River. Harold looked older than I remembered, his silver hair thinner, and his face more lined with worry. "Jody, what I'm about to tell you is going to be difficult to hear." He began pulling a thick manila folder from his desk drawer. "Your family has been struggling financially for almost 2 years now." My heart sank as Harold explained the devastating details. My father David's construction company had gone bankrupt 18 months ago when his biggest client, a local housing developer named Peterson Properties, had defaulted on payments totaling over $200,000. The domino effect had been swift and merciless. "Your mother's boutique clothing store closed during the pandemic." Harold continued, his voice gentle but steady. "The combination of reduced foot traffic and supply chain issues made it impossible to keep the doors open. She lost everything she'd invested in inventory." But the worst revelation was yet to come. Harold opened the folder and spread several documents across his mahogany desk. Bank statements, loan applications, and correspondence that painted a picture of desperation I'd never imagined. "Jody, your parents took out a home equity loan against the lake house 18 months ago. They borrowed $150,000 to cover their debts and maintain their lifestyle, while they tried to get back on their feet." The room started spinning again, just like it had at the restaurant. "But Harold, I've been sending them money every month for the house expenses. What happened to those payments?" Harold's expression grew even more somber. "Those payments have been going directly into your father's personal checking account. The lake house mortgage, which should have been paid off years ago with the insurance money from your grandfather's death, now carries a significant equity loan balance." I felt physically sick. For 3 years, I'd been sacrificing my own financial stability to help maintain what I thought was our family heritage, only to discover that my parents had been using my money to fund their daily expenses while secretly mortgaging our grandmother's property. "There's more, Jody," Harold said quietly. "Based on the timeline and the way this sale was announced, I believe your family has been planning this for months. They've been waiting for your graduation to present it as a gift, a way to help you start your career debt-free. The manipulation was breathtaking in its calculated cruelty. They'd turned my greatest achievement into the perfect cover for their financial desperation. And now, if the house sold, I would lose the one place that held all my precious memories, with Grandma Rose plus the inheritance that should have been mine to cherish and protect for future generations. Harold leaned forward, his eyes filled with the same protective concern I remembered from childhood. Jody, if this sale goes through, you'll lose everything your grandmother wanted to preserve for you. But there might be something we can do about it. Can you come back tomorrow morning? I need to review some documents tonight. I arrived at Harold's office the next morning with a mixture of dread and desperate hope churning in my stomach. Janet greeted me with a sad smile and immediately showed me into Harold's office, where he was waiting with an even thicker manila folder spread across his desk. Jody, sit down. Harold said, his voice carrying an excitement that seemed completely at odds with yesterday's somber discussion. What I discovered last night changes everything. He handed me a document that looked official and important, with gold-embossed seals and elegant script handwriting that I recognized immediately as Grandma Rose's. My hands trembled as I read the heading, Deed, Transfer, and Trust Documentation. Your grandmother was far more clever than any of us realized, Harold explained, pointing to specific paragraphs in the document. 3 months before she passed away, Grandma Rose secretly transferred the lake house deed directly to you. But she included a very specific stipulation. My eyes widened as I read the carefully worded conditions. The transfer wouldn't become effective, and I wouldn't be informed about it until I either turned 28 or graduated from college, whichever came later. Since I'd turned 28 just 6 weeks ago and graduated last week, both conditions had now been met. Harold, are you telling me that I actually own the lake house? That's exactly what I'm telling you, sweetheart. You are the legal owner of that property, and you have been for the past 6 weeks. Your family doesn't know about this transfer because your grandmother specifically requested that it remain confidential until the proper time. The implications hit me like a freight train. If I owned the property, then the equity loan my parents had taken out was not just morally wrong, it was legally invalid. They'd used a property they didn't own as collateral for a loan. Harold pulled out another set of documents, these ones bearing the letterhead of Pacific Northwest Bank. This is where it gets really interesting, Jody. The bank has been trying to contact the real property owner about refinancing options and some irregularities in their records. They've been calling the number associated with the equity loan, but that's your father's phone. I remembered the mysterious voicemail I'd received 2 days ago from someone at the mortgage company asking about refinancing my lakefront estate. I'd assumed it was a wrong number and deleted it without calling back. Grandma Rose suspected your father had financial problems long before they became apparent, Harold continued. She'd watched him make questionable business decisions for years, and she knew that eventually he might try to use the lake house as collateral for his mistakes. Harold showed me copies of conversations between him and my grandmother during her final months. Grandma Rose had been meticulous in her planning, consulting with financial advisors, and even hiring a private investigator to assess David's business practices. She discovered that he'd already approached several lenders about potential equity loans on the lake house, even while she was still alive. Your grandmother's final letter to you explains her reasoning, Harold said, handing me an envelope with my name written in Grandma Rose's careful cursive. She wanted to ensure that the family legacy would be protected by someone who truly understood its value, not just its price. As I read Grandma Rose's words, tears streamed down my face. She'd written about watching me grow into a young woman who cared more about people than profit, who chose social work over more lucrative careers because I wanted to help families in crisis. She'd seen in me the same values that had guided her through 73 years of life. But Grandma Rose's letter also revealed her deepest concern. She'd worried that David's financial irresponsibility would eventually tear the family apart. She'd hoped that by placing the property in my hands, she could prevent that destruction while still finding a way to help her son when he inevitably needed it. "There's one more thing, Jody," Harold said, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. "The equity loan your parents took out is technically fraudulent since they weren't the legal owners of the property. The bank is going to want answers about how that happened." I sat in stunned silence, trying to process the enormity of what I'd just learned. In the span of 24 hours, I'd gone from believing my family was sacrificing their inheritance to help me to discovering that I actually owned the property they were trying to sell and that their equity loan might constitute mortgage fraud. The choice before me was devastating: expose my family's deception and potentially send my father to prison for fraud, or allow them to sell my inheritance to cover up their illegal loan. Either way, the family I'd grown up loving and trusting would never be the same. Harold reached across the desk and squeezed my hand gently. "Jody, your grandmother anticipated this might happen. She left very specific instructions about what to do if your family ever tried to manipulate or deceive you regarding the property. Tomorrow, I think we need to call the bank and have a conversation about what's really going on." Instead of waiting for Harold's planned call to the bank, I decided to confront my family directly. I needed to understand how deep this deception ran and whether there was any chance of resolving it without destroying our relationships forever. I drove to my parents' house in Lake Oswego, a beautiful suburban neighborhood where they'd lived for the past 15 years. The irony wasn't lost on me that they'd chosen to keep their expensive home while secretly planning to sell the lake house that held our family's most precious memories. As I pulled into the circular driveway, I noticed an unfamiliar silver Mercedes parked behind my mother's car. Through the large front windows, I could see several people gathered around the dining room table, which was covered with papers and documents. I rang the doorbell and my mother, Linda, answered with a surprised expression that quickly shifted to guilt. Behind her, I could see my father, David, my sister, Amanda, and a well-dressed man in his 50s who was clearly a real estate professional. "Jody, honey, what are you doing here?" Linda asked, her voice higher than usual. "We weren't expecting you." "I need to talk to the family," I said firmly. "It's about the lake house." Amanda appeared at my mother's shoulder, her face flushed with what looked like a combination of excitement and panic. "Actually, Jody, this isn't a great time. We're in the middle of finalizing some paperwork with Marcus, our real estate agent." The man at the table stood up and extended his hand with a professional smile. "Marcus Patterson Premier Properties. You must be the daughter they're helping with student loans. What a generous family you have." The casual way he mentioned my supposed benefit from the sale made my stomach turn. I looked directly at Amanda, then at my parents, who wouldn't meet my eyes. "I'd like to speak with my family privately, please," I said to Marcus. Of course," he replied, gathering his papers. "I'll just step outside and make some calls. Take all the time you need." Once Marcus left, the four of us stood in an uncomfortable circle in the foyer. The house felt different somehow, as if the very air had changed since I'd learned the truth about the lake house ownership. "Jody, before you say anything," David began, his voice carrying a defensive edge I'd rarely heard before. "I want you to understand that everything we're doing is for your benefit. You're starting your career with over $60,000 in student debt. We're trying to give you a fresh start. Dad, I need to ask you something, and I want you to tell me the truth." I replied, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "What happened to the $800 I've been sending you every month for the lake house expenses?" The silence that followed was deafening. David's face went pale, and Linda started twisting her wedding ring, a nervous habit I'd noticed since childhood. But it was Amanda's reaction that shocked me most. She looked angry rather than guilty. "Jody, you're being ridiculous," Amanda snapped. "Mom and Dad have been struggling financially, and you've been living in your little graduate student bubble, completely oblivious to what's been happening in the real world. That money helped keep this family afloat. So you admit that my payments weren't going to lake house expenses." David finally spoke up, his voice heavy with shame. "Jody, we never meant for it to go this far. When the business failed and your mother lost the boutique, We were drowning in debt. The money you sent helped us keep the lights on and put food on the table. But Amanda wasn't finished. With a self-righteous tone that made my blood boil, she continued her attack. And another thing, Jody, we've been planning this sale for months. We've all talked about it extensively, and we all agreed it was the right thing to do. You should be grateful instead of making everyone feel guilty. Months. I repeated the word, hitting me like a physical blow. You've been planning this for months, and nobody thought to include me in the conversation. Linda finally spoke, tears beginning to flow down her cheeks. Honey, we knew you'd be emotional about selling the lake house, but sometimes parents have to make difficult decisions for their children's benefit. We thought it would be easier to present it as a done deal, so you wouldn't worry about the financial burden. The manipulation was staggering. They'd taken my money under false pretenses, used our family property as collateral for their debts, and planned its sale without my input, all while convincing themselves they were acting in my best interest. But Amanda's next revelation showed just how calculated this deception had been. Actually, Jody, I should probably tell you that I was the one who suggested we wait until after your graduation to announce the sale, she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I thought it would make a nice graduation gift, freedom from student debt. And honestly, the timing works out perfectly for me too. What do you mean it works out perfectly for you? Amanda's smile widened, and for the first time, I saw something cold and calculating in my sister's expression that I'd never noticed before. Travis and I are getting married next spring, and weddings are expensive. Mom and Dad agreed that since I'm not the one with student loans, it would only be fair if I got something to help with wedding costs. The room fell silent as the full scope of Amanda's manipulation became clear. She hadn't just agreed to the lake house sale, she'd orchestrated it using my student debt as cover for her own financial benefit. Marcus Patterson chose that moment to knock on the front door, apparently finished with his phone calls. As David moved to let him back in, Marcus made an offhand comment that would prove to be another devastating revelation. I have to say, folks, I'm a little surprised you want to move so quickly on this sale, he said, settling back at the dining room table. Lakefront property values have been climbing steadily this year. You could probably get another $50,000 if you waited until spring and marketed it properly. But I understand you need a quick sale for family reasons. Another $50,000. Amanda had pushed for a quick, undervalued sale because she wanted her wedding money as soon as possible, not because my student loans were some kind of emergency that couldn't wait a few more months. Standing in my childhood home surrounded by family members who had systematically deceived and manipulated me, I realized that the people I'd trusted most in the world had been working together to rob me of my inheritance. And the worst part was that they'd convinced themselves they were doing me a favor. The next morning, I was sitting in my apartment trying to decide whether to call Harold or drive straight to the police station when my phone rang. The caller ID showed Pacific Northwest Bank, and I remembered the voicemail I'd ignored earlier in the week. Ms. Williams, this is Catherine Rodriguez, mortgage specialist at Pacific Northwest Bank. I've been trying to reach you regarding some irregularities with the equity line of credit on your lakefront property in Lake Chelan. My heart started pounding. What kind of irregularities? Ms. Williams, I'm going to need you to come into our offices this morning if possible. There are some serious discrepancies in our records that require immediate attention. Are you available to meet within the next 2 hours? I agreed to meet Catherine at 11 o'clock and immediately called Harold to let him know about the bank's request. His response was swift and decisive. I'm coming with you, Jody. Don't sign anything, don't agree to anything, and don't answer any questions until I'm there. At Pacific Northwest Bank's downtown Portland branch, Catherine Rodriguez turned out to be a sharp-featured woman in her 40s, with the demeanor of someone who'd seen every type of financial fraud imaginable. She led Harold and me into a private conference room lined with certificates and awards for ethical banking practices. Ms. Williams, according to our title verification process, you are the legal owner of the property at 727 Lakeshore Drive in Lake Chelan. Catherine began spreading several documents across the polished conference table. However, the equity loan application we processed 6 months ago was submitted by someone claiming to be the property owner. Harold and I exchanged glances as Catherine continued her explanation. The bank had recently implemented new verification procedures following a series of mortgage fraud cases in the Pacific Northwest, and my property had been flagged during their systematic review. The application was submitted by David Williams, claiming to be the property owner, Catherine said, pointing to a signature on the loan documents. But our title search now shows that ownership was transferred to you, Jody Williams, over a year before this application was submitted. But the revelation that made my blood run cold came when Catherine showed us copies of additional documents submitted with the loan application. Someone had forged my signature on papers, claiming to grant David power of attorney over the property, which would have given him the legal right to use it as collateral. Ms. Williams, I need to ask you directly. Did you sign these power of attorney documents? I studied the signature carefully. It was close to my handwriting, but not quite right. The J in Jody was slightly different, and my last name was missing the small flourish I always added to the final "es." No, I absolutely did not sign these documents, I said firmly. Catherine nodded grimly. That's what we suspected. Ms. Williams, I'm required to inform you that we're freezing the equity line of credit, pending a formal investigation into mortgage fraud. Additionally, any pending real estate transactions involving this property will be blocked until this matter is resolved. Harold leaned forward with interest. What does that mean for the sale that's supposed to close next week? The sale cannot proceed, Catherine replied. We're placing a legal hold on the property title until we determine who submitted these fraudulent documents and why. As Catherine excused herself to make some phone calls, Harold and I sat in stunned silence. The bank investigation was going to blow up my family's entire scheme, but it was also going to expose criminal behavior that could send my father or sister to prison. When Catherine returned, she brought even more disturbing news. Ms. Williams, I've been in contact with our fraud investigation team, and they've discovered that this isn't the first time these types of documents have appeared in our system. She explained that the bank's fraud team had been tracking a pattern of suspicious equity loan applications involving family properties. In each case, someone with access to family financial information had submitted applications using forged power of attorney documents to access property equity without the real owner's knowledge. In several of these cases, we've found connections to employees at other financial institutions who helped facilitate the fraud. Catherine continued. Ms. Williams, do any of your family members work in banking or real estate? My heart sank as I remembered Amanda mentioning her fiancé Travis several times over the past year. He worked at Columbia River Bank, one of Pacific Northwest Bank's competitors. I'd met him only briefly at family gatherings, but I recalled Amanda bragging about his expertise in mortgage lending. My sister's fiancé works at Columbia River Bank, I admitted reluctantly. Catherine's expression darkened immediately. Travis Henderson. Yes, that's him. You know who he is. Ms. Williams, Travis Henderson is actually the reason we implemented our new verification procedures. He's currently under investigation by the FBI for facilitating mortgage fraud involving family properties. We believe he's been systematically targeting families where one member has access to property documents. The room started spinning again as the full scope of the conspiracy became clear. This wasn't just my family making poor financial decisions or even Amanda manipulating our parents for wedding money. This was an organized fraud scheme, and Amanda wasn't just Travis's accomplice, she was his partner in crime. Harold's voice was tight with anger when he spoke. Catherine, what happens next? Mr. Brennan, I'm required to report this to the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. Based on the pattern we've identified and Travis Henderson's involvement, this is now a federal investigation. Ms. Williams, I recommend you contact the FBI immediately to report what you know about your family's involvement. As we left the bank, Harold put a protective arm around my shoulder. Jody, I know this is overwhelming, but you need to understand something important. Your grandmother anticipated that financial pressure might make your family vulnerable to bad influences. That's one of the reasons she transferred the property to you to protect it from exactly this kind of situation. But protecting the property meant destroying my family. And as much as they had deceived and manipulated me, they were still the people who had raised me, supported my education, and loved me in their own flawed way. The choice was no longer between family loyalty and financial justice. It was between enabling criminal behavior and protecting other families from becoming Travis and Amanda's next victims. 3 days after my meeting with Catherine Rodriguez FBI Special Agent Maria Santos called and asked me to come to the federal building in downtown Portland. Harold insisted on accompanying me, and we found ourselves in a sterile conference room, surrounded by case files and computer screens displaying financial records. Agent Santos was a woman in her early 40s with kind eyes and a professional demeanor that immediately put me at ease. She explained that the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit had been investigating Travis Henderson for over 8 months, following a trail of fraudulent mortgage applications across Oregon, Washington, and Northern California. Ms. Williams, your case is actually the breakthrough we've been waiting for. Agent Santos explained, opening a thick case file labeled Operation Family Trust. Travis Henderson has been running a sophisticated scheme targeting families with valuable real estate, but until now we haven't been able to identify his recruitment methods or how he gains access to family financial information. The revelation that followed was more shocking than anything I could have imagined. Travis hadn't randomly met my sister Amanda at a coffee shop or through mutual friends as she'd told the family. He had specifically targeted her after researching our family's property holdings and identifying the lake house as a valuable asset. According to our investigation, Travis systematically identifies families with valuable real estate by accessing public property records and tax information. Agent Santos continued. He then researches the family dynamics, looking for members who might have access to important documents but feel overlooked or financially stressed. Amanda fit the profile perfectly. As the middle child who hadn't received the same educational support I had, she'd always felt overshadowed by my academic achievements and close relationship with Grandma Rose. Travis had exploited those insecurities, convincing her that she deserved financial compensation for years of being the forgotten daughter. But the FBI's investigation revealed that Amanda's role went far beyond being a victim of manipulation. Over the past year, she had helped Travis target other families in our social circle, including our neighbors, the Johnsons, and our family friends, the Petersons, both of whom owned valuable property. Ms. Williams, we have evidence that your sister actively participated in researching target families, including accessing their personal information through your mother's former boutique customer database. Agent Santos said, showing me printed emails between Amanda and Travis. She wasn't just helping him with your family's property, she was helping him identify and manipulate multiple families. The emails revealed a calculated and heartless operation. Amanda had provided Travis with detailed information about family relationships, financial situations, and property ownership throughout their community. She'd even helped him create fake romantic backstories for approaching other potential victims. Harold's face was ashen as he read through the evidence. Agent Santos, how many families have been affected by this scheme? So far, we've identified 12 families who lost a combined total of over $2.7 million in fraudulent equity loans. She replied. In some cases, elderly family members lost their homes entirely when the loans couldn't be repaid. The human cost of Amanda and Travis's scheme was staggering. I thought about the Johnsons, who were in their 70s and had always been kind to me. According to the FBI files, they'd lost their family home of 40 years because Travis had convinced their grandson to forge documents for an equity loan that was never repaid. Agent Santos pulled out another folder containing surveillance photos and financial records. Ms. Williams, we've been monitoring Travis and Amanda's activities for the past month. They've already spent over $15,000 of your family's equity loan money on wedding deposits and vacation bookings. The photos showed Amanda and Travis at upscale jewelry stores, luxury hotels, and high-end bridal boutiques, spending money stolen from families like the Johnsons and the Petersons. While elderly couples lost their homes, my sister was planning her dream wedding with the proceeds. "We're ready to make arrests," Agent Santos announced, "but we need your cooperation to ensure we can recover as much of the stolen money as possible and prevent Travis from destroying evidence." She explained that the FBI wanted me to participate in a recorded phone conversation with Amanda, during which I would ask specific questions about the lake house sale and Travis's involvement. The goal was to get Amanda to admit her role in the fraud on tape, providing additional evidence for the federal prosecution. Harold objected immediately. "Agent Santos, you're asking Jody to betray her own sister. That's an enormous emotional burden to place on someone who's already been victimized by this scheme." But I thought about the Johnsons losing their family home and the Petersons facing bankruptcy because of fraud my sister had helped facilitate. Amanda had made her choice when she decided to target innocent families for financial gain. Now I had to make mine. "I'll do it," I said quietly. "But I want to know what happens to my parents. They took out the equity loan, but they didn't know about the forged documents." Agent Santos nodded approvingly. "Your parents were also victims in this scheme, Ms. Williams. Based on our investigation, they genuinely believed they were borrowing against property they owned, and they had no knowledge of the forged power of attorney documents. They'll face some financial consequences, but no criminal charges." 2 days later, I sat in the FBI's surveillance van outside Amanda's apartment building, wearing a recording device and trying to steady my nerves. Harold had wanted to be there for moral support, but Agent Santos explained that too many people might make Amanda suspicious. The phone call itself was surreal. Amanda answered cheerfully, excited to tell me about her latest wedding planning activities. For the first few minutes, I listened to her describe flower arrangements and menu selections, all funded by money stolen from families whose lives had been destroyed by her actions. When I finally steered the conversation toward the lake house sale, Amanda's tone shifted slightly. She seemed nervous about the delays and kept asking if I'd heard anything from the bank about when the closing might be rescheduled. "Amanda, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me," I said, following the script Agent Santos had provided. "How long have you and Travis been planning this sale, "What do you mean planning it, Jody? We're trying to help you with your student loans." "But Travis works at a bank, right? Did he help Dad with the equity loan application?" There was a long pause before Amanda answered, and when she spoke, her voice carried a defensive edge that I'd never heard before. "Travis just provided some guidance about the process, Jody. He knows about these things because of his job." "What kind of guidance?" Another pause longer this time. "Look, Jody Dad was struggling with the paperwork and Travis helped him understand what documents he needed to submit. It's not a big deal." "Did Travis help Dad sign any of those documents?" "I don't know what you're trying to imply, but Travis was just being helpful to our family," Amanda snapped. "And honestly, I'm getting tired of your attitude about this whole thing. We're trying to help you and you're acting like we're criminals or something." The irony of her statement was heartbreaking. Agent Santos gave me a thumbs-up signal indicating they'd gotten the admission they needed about Travis's direct involvement in the document preparation. But the conversation was about to take a turn that would shatter what remained of my relationship with Amanda forever. "Jody, there's something else I need to tell you," Amanda continued, her voice now carrying a tone of smug satisfaction. "Travis and I have been talking, and we think it might be better if you distance yourself from the family for a while after this whole thing is settled." "What do you mean, distance myself?" "Well, you've made it pretty clear that you don't appreciate what we're trying to do for you. And honestly, Travis thinks you might cause problems for us in the future. So maybe it would be better if you just took your debt-free fresh start and built your own life somewhere else." The casual cruelty of her suggestion took my breath away. After stealing my inheritance and destroying our family's legacy, Amanda wanted me to disappear so she and Travis could continue their criminal activities without interference. "Amanda, are you telling me that you want me to stay away from our family?" "I'm telling you that some people are more important than others, Jody. Travis is going to be my husband, and he comes first. If you can't accept that, then maybe you need to figure out your own priorities." Agent Santos was frantically writing notes and signaling for me to keep Amanda talking, but I could barely focus on the conversation anymore. My sister had just told me that her criminal boyfriend was more important than the family that had raised her, loved her, and supported her through every challenge she'd ever faced. The recording session ended with Amanda hanging up on me when I pressed her for more details about Travis's role in the loan application. But Agent Santos assured me that they had everything they needed to proceed with arrests. That evening, Harold and I sat in his office as he explained what would happen next. The FBI would arrest both Travis and Amanda within the next 24 hours, and the case would likely go to federal court within 6 months. "Jody, you need to prepare yourself for the possibility that Amanda will blame you for her arrest," Harold warned gently. "People who commit crimes often feel victimized when they face consequences for their actions." But I was already prepared for Amanda's anger. What I wasn't prepared for was the devastating phone call I received from my mother the next morning, sobbing as she told me that FBI agents had just arrested Amanda at her apartment. "Jody, they said she's been stealing money from families all over Portland," Linda cried. "They said Travis has been running some kind of con game and Amanda has been helping him. How could we not have known?" As I listened to my mother's heartbreak, I realized that Amanda and Travis's scheme had claimed one more victim, the loving, trusting family that had raised us both. The betrayal would leave scars that might never fully heal. The morning of Amanda's arrest, I received an unexpected call from Harold asking me to come to his office immediately. When I arrived, I found him sitting behind his desk with a smile I hadn't seen since before this entire nightmare began. "Jody, your grandmother left one more surprise," he announced, pulling out yet another manila folder. "I've been waiting for the right moment to share this with you, and I think that moment has finally arrived." Inside the folder were documents establishing something called the Rose Williams Family Security Trust, dated just 2 months before my grandmother's death. According to the paperwork, Grandma Rose had been quietly setting aside money for over 15 years, using funds from her teacher's pension, Social Security benefits, and careful investments. "Your grandmother anticipated that David might eventually face serious financial troubles," Harold explained, his voice filled with admiration for my grandmother's foresight. "She wanted to ensure that the family could help each other through genuine crises without having to sacrifice the lake house. The trust contained enough money to pay off my remaining student loans completely, plus an additional $50,000 to help my parents rebuild their lives without the burden of the fraudulent equity loan. But Grandma Rose had included specific conditions for accessing the funds. The money can only be released if all family members agree on its use, and only for legitimate needs, not to enable poor choices or criminal behavior," Harold continued. "Your grandmother wrote that she wanted the trust to bring the family together, not tear it apart. But there was another condition that brought tears to my eyes. The trust required that whoever accessed the money must also commit to using part of it to help other families in financial crisis, either through charitable giving or community service. Grandma Rose wanted her legacy to extend beyond our family to help others facing similar struggles. Over the following weeks, as the FBI investigation continued, my parents and I began the difficult process of rebuilding our relationship. David was devastated when he learned that Amanda had manipulated him into committing fraud, and Linda struggled with guilt over not recognizing the warning signs of her daughter's criminal behavior. "Jody, I keep thinking about all the times Amanda asked questions about family finances or wanted to know details about the lake house," Linda said during one of our weekly coffee meetings. "I thought she was just taking an interest in family business, but she was gathering information for Travis." David's recovery was more complicated. The shame of being manipulated into fraud combined with the loss of his business and the realization that his daughter was a criminal had sent him into a deep depression. But slowly, with counseling and support from the family, he began to rebuild his sense of self-worth. "Your grandmother always said I was too trusting for my own good," David admitted during a family dinner at the lake house 6 months after Amanda's arrest. "I should have known something was wrong when Travis offered to help with the loan paperwork, but I wanted so badly to believe there was an easy solution to our problems. The lake house itself became a symbol of healing for our family. Using money from Grandma Rose's trust, we restored the property to its original condition, repairing years of deferred maintenance and updating the kitchen and bathrooms while preserving the rustic charm that made it special. I moved into the lake house full-time, commuting to my new job at a family crisis intervention center in nearby Wenatchee. The work was challenging but fulfilling, helping other families navigate financial difficulties and relationship crises without falling victim to predators like Travis. Meanwhile, the FBI investigation expanded far beyond our case. Travis had been running similar schemes across multiple states, and investigators ultimately identified over 30 families who had been victimized. Amanda's cooperation with the investigation, motivated more by a plea bargain than genuine remorse, helped recover almost $800,000 in stolen funds. But Amanda's legal troubles were far from over. Federal prosecutors charged her with conspiracy to commit wire fraud, money laundering, and identity theft. Her decision to cooperate with investigators earned her a reduced sentence of 3 years in federal prison, while Travis received 8 years for organizing and leading the criminal enterprise. The most difficult part of the entire ordeal was visiting Amanda in federal prison before her sentencing. She looked smaller somehow, sitting across from me in the sterile visiting room, wearing an orange jumpsuit that seemed to diminish her presence. "Jody, I need you to know that I never meant for things to go this far," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Travis convinced me that we were just taking what should have been mine anyway. He said you got all the attention and opportunities, and I deserve something too. Amanda, you helped him steal from the Johnsons and the Petersons." I replied, my voice steady despite the pain in my heart. "Those families lost their homes because of what you did." For the first time since the investigation began, Amanda showed genuine remorse. Tears streamed down her face as she admitted that she hadn't thought about the human cost of their scheme. She'd been so focused on feeling victimized by our family dynamics that she'd lost sight of the real victims Travis was creating. "I know you probably can't forgive me," Amanda said quietly, "but I want you to know that I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to make amends for what I did. The counselor here says I need to accept responsibility for my choices instead of blaming other people for my problems." I left the prison that day with a complicated mix of emotions. I would probably never fully trust Amanda again, but I could see genuine remorse and a desire to change. Prison had forced her to confront the selfishness and entitlement that had made her vulnerable to Travis's manipulation. Over the following year, our family developed new traditions and stronger boundaries. David rebuilt his construction business with a focus on ethical practices and realistic growth, while Linda opened a small nonprofit boutique that sold locally made crafts, with proceeds supporting families in financial crisis. The lake house became a gathering place for extended family and friends, but also a retreat center for families working through crisis situations. I established the Rose Williams Family Resilience Program, offering counseling and financial education to help other families avoid the kinds of problems that had nearly destroyed ours. Most importantly, we learned to have honest conversations about money expectations and family dynamics. No more secrets, no more assumptions, and no more enabling each other's poor choices in the name of family loyalty. Grandma Rose's wisdom had guided us through the darkest period in our family's history, teaching us that true family love sometimes means setting boundaries and holding each other accountable for harmful behavior. Her legacy lived on not just in the lake house, but in the stronger, more honest family we became. 1 year after Amanda's sentencing, our family gathered at the lake house for what had become our annual Honesty Day, a tradition I'd started to ensure we never again fell into patterns of secrecy and deception that had made us vulnerable to manipulation. The morning began with David and Linda sharing updates on their financial recovery and personal growth. David's construction company had not only recovered from bankruptcy, but was thriving with a focus on sustainable building practices and transparent business relationships. Linda's nonprofit boutique had raised over $20,000 for local families facing housing crises. "Jody, your grandmother would be so proud of what this family has become," Linda said as we sat on the restored deck overlooking the crystal-clear waters of Lake Chelan. "We're stronger now than we ever were before because we're honest with each other." The Rose Williams Family Resilience Program had grown beyond anything I'd imagined when I first established it. We'd helped 43 families navigate financial crises without falling victim to predatory lenders or fraudulent schemes. The program combined financial counseling, family therapy, and legal advocacy to address the root causes of family financial problems. But the most meaningful part of our work was the relationship we'd built with the families who had been victimized by Travis and Amanda's scheme. The Johnsons had become like surrogate grandparents to me, and their wisdom about forgiveness and healing had guided our family's recovery process. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or pretending that bad things didn't happen, Mrs. Johnson had told me during one of our monthly visits. It means choosing to move forward without carrying the poison of resentment in your heart. Amanda was scheduled for release from federal prison in 18 months, and our family had been discussing what her reintegration might look like. We'd established clear boundaries. She would be welcome to rebuild relationships with us, but only if she demonstrated genuine commitment to making amends and contributing positively to the community she'd harmed. Her letters from prison showed real growth and accountability. She'd earned her GED and was participating in programs designed to help white-collar offenders understand the impact of their crimes on victims. Most importantly, she'd broken all contact with Travis, who continued to maintain his innocence despite overwhelming evidence of his guilt. I'm learning that family loyalty means telling each other the truth, even when it's uncomfortable, Amanda had written in her most recent letter. I spent so many years feeling sorry for myself that I never stopped to appreciate what I actually had. The lake house itself had become a symbol of resilience and renewal. The gardens that Grandma Rose had planted were more beautiful than ever, tended by volunteer families from our resilience program, who found peace in working with their hands while processing their own struggles. I'd also restored Grandma Rose's workshop, converting it into a counseling space where families could have difficult conversations in a peaceful, supportive environment. The walls were lined with photos of all the families we'd helped, along with thank you letters and updates on their progress. But perhaps the most important change was in how I understood my own identity and purpose. Grandma Rose had seen in me the potential to be a family protector and community leader, someone who could help others navigate crisis while maintaining compassion and integrity. My work had expanded beyond individual family counseling to include advocacy for banking regulations that would prevent predatory lending practices. I testified before the state legislature about the need for stronger verification procedures for equity loans and had helped draft legislation requiring additional safeguards for elderly property owners. As I stood on the dock where Grandma Rose had taught me to fish, I reflected on the lessons that had emerged from our family's crisis. True strength comes not from avoiding problems, but from facing them honestly and working together to find ethical solutions. Family love is measured not by blind loyalty, but by the willingness to hold each other accountable for harmful behavior. Most importantly, I'd learned that protecting what you love sometimes means being willing to fight for it, even when that fight is painful and complicated. Grandma Rose had given me the tools to protect our family's legacy, but she'd also given me the wisdom to know that legacy was about more than property or money. It was about values, integrity, and the kind of people we chose to be. The sun was setting over Lake Chelan, painting the water in shades of gold and pink that reminded me of all the summer evenings I'd spent here with Grandma Rose. She'd taught me that every ending was also a beginning, and every crisis contained the seeds of growth and renewal. Our family's story had begun with betrayal and deception, but it was ending with truth healing and a commitment to helping others avoid similar pain. Amanda's choices had nearly destroyed us, but they'd also revealed our capacity for forgiveness, growth, and resilience. As I watched the stars emerge in the darkening sky, I felt Grandma Rose's presence in the gentle breeze that rustled through the lavender plants she'd taught me to tend. Her greatest gift hadn't been the lake house or the trust fund, it had been the example of how to love your family enough to protect them from their own worst impulses, while never giving up hope for their redemption. The next morning I would return to my work helping other families navigate their own crises. But tonight, I was simply grateful to be part of a family that had learned to choose truth over comfort, accountability, over enabling and genuine love, over destructive loyalty. Grandma Rose had always said that the measure of a person wasn't whether they made mistakes, but whether they learned from them and used their experiences to help others. Our family had finally lived up to that standard, and in doing so, we discovered that healing was not only possible, but transformative. I want to hear from you. Have you ever discovered that family members weren't who you thought they were? How did you handle the betrayal, and what did you learn about yourself in the process? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like this story if it resonated with you. Subscribe for more true family stories about overcoming betrayal and finding strength you never knew you had. And share this with anyone who might need to hear that healing is possible even after the deepest family wounds. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable someone's harmful choices. May you always have the courage to protect what matters most, even when it costs you everything you thought you wanted.